Naim Qassem has drawn a hard line. No negotiations with Israel, no disarmament, no compromise. We won't betray the blood of martyrs. The message is simple. This conflict isn't winding down, it's being reset. Hezbollah Secretary General Sheikh Naim Qassem has stepped forward with a message that left little room for interpretation. Hezbollah will not negotiate with Israel, will not give up its weapons, and is not going anywhere. Qassem affirmed in a statement that
the Israeli occupation will not remain on 1 inch of our occupied land, and our people will return to their land. Oh, our people, just as we resisted together, we will rebuild it together.
Qassem laid out 5 non-negotiable demands before any resolution of the Lebanese crisis could be considered. A full end to Israeli aggression by land, sea and air, complete withdrawal from occupied Lebanese territory, release of all detainees, the return of displaced residents, and reconstruction. On the question of direct talks between Beirut and Tel Aviv, Qassem was categorical.
We categorically reject direct negotiations. The government cannot continue on its path while relinquishing Lebanon's rights and territory.
Qassem turned his sharpest words on the Lebanese government itself, accusing it of rushing into what he called a humiliating concession, signing a ceasefire agreement in Washington without even convening, while granting Israel freedom to continue its operations. He demanded the government reverse course, return to indirect channels, and rescind its March 2nd decision, criminalizing the resistance and its supporters. On weapons, he was equally unambiguous.
The weapons of the resistance are for confronting aggression and defending our existence, and we will not give up our weapons or our defense.
Qassem credited Iran's intervention during ceasefire negotiations in Pakistan as the reason a truce was reached at all, while making clear that Hezbollah considered itself bound by none of the terms agreed to on its behalf. Qassem acknowledged the scale of losses the resistance had suffered since March 2nd, but framed them as proof of endurance rather than weakness. The enemy, he said, had been surprised, and it had run out of road.
The resistance continues to be strong and cannot be defeated, and the enemy was surprised by the steadfastness of the fighters.
With Israel continuing its offensive in Lebanon, it would be interesting to see how they respond. For years, Israel's military planners believed that distance was protection. Push the enemy back far enough, and the rockets, the missiles, the anti-tank rounds, they'd fall short. That logic is now being tested by something that fits inside a backpack and costs less than a used car. Fiber optic drones, guided not by radio signals or GPS, but by a spool of thin cable that unwinds as the drone flies are showing up on battlefields in southern Lebanon. And they are quietly dismantling one of Israel's central strategic assumptions.
A security zone extending 10 kilometers from the border to the anti-tank line, stretching from the Mediterranean coast in the west to the Mount Hermon area in the east, in order to remove infiltration threats and defend against direct fire on communities.
The buffer was designed with a specific weapon in mind, the Cornet anti-tank missile, which demands a relatively direct line of sight, or the Almas, typically limited to roughly 8 kilometers. The math seemed to work. Keep Hezbollah far enough back, and their most precise weapons become useless. But drones don't obey that math. Unlike missiles, which are expensive, running tens of thousands of dollars per unit, and require supply chains that run through Iran and are subject to political friction, drones are assembled from parts available online or printed on a 3D machine. The warheads are often nothing more than RPG charges or adapted grenades. And the fiber optic cable guiding them? A few $100s, maybe less. The technology itself is not new. It resembles the wire-guided Saga missiles that Egypt fired at Israeli tanks during the Yom Kippur War in 1973. But the irony is sharp. A method older than the internet is now defeating some of the most sophisticated electronic warfare systems in the world, because you cannot jam a wire.
We were in a village in southern Lebanon toward the end of 2024. At one point, a drone carrying a warhead approached us and was brought down by an electronic warfare system mounted on one of the tanks. If it had been using fiber optics, that wouldn't have helped.
On April 2nd of this year, that scenario became real. Hezbollah struck an Israeli Naim armored carrier in the Qantara municipality using a fiber optic FPV drone armed with an Iranian anti-tank RPG warhead. It was a proof of concept and a warning. In Ukraine, where this technology was refined under pressure, fiber optic drones are already operating at ranges of 20 to 30 kilometers. And experience from that war suggests that what works in Ukraine doesn't stay in Ukraine for long. The Israeli defense establishment knows it has a problem. The question is whether it can solve it fast enough. 38 soldiers have been wounded by drone strikes since Israel's current Lebanon campaign began in March, according to military correspondent Shay Levy of Mako. That number is expected to climb, and the nature of these injuries is changing too. American analyst Ryan Macbeth has observed that while mines and roadside bombs, the signature weapons of the War on Terror era, typically damage the lower body, drones tend to strike the face, neck, arms, and chest, the upper body, the parts that are harder to protect and harder to survive. Rescue units themselves are now under threat. The drone doesn't distinguish between a fighter and a medic. The IDF is not standing still. It is investing in radar systems small enough to be carried by individual soldiers, in net guns, in specialized fragmentation ammunition. In Europe and Ukraine, shotguns with adapted shells are being used to knock drones out of the air. Ukraine's Sting interceptor drone is designed to hunt larger threats, like the Shahed 136, but the smaller FPV drone remains slippery, fast, low, maneuverable, the size of a large bird. A military source speaking to Haaretz acknowledged the scale of the challenge.
This is a relatively new threat, so it is constantly evolving. We've been dealing with it for about 2 years and learning a great deal from Ukraine. There is a major effort to provide solutions at the field command level, alongside intelligence teams focused on detecting and locating drones and units specializing in low-altitude threats. The problem is that existing measures do not provide a comprehensive response, and even what does exist is not always available in sufficient quantities.
That gap between what the threat demands and what the army currently has is where soldiers are being hurt. The components Hezbollah is using to build these weapons are, in many cases, the same ones available to hobbyists building racing drones in their garages. The advantage Israel has historically held, in technology, in funding, in engineering, is being compressed by the fact that its adversary is shopping from the same catalogue as everyone else. The buffer zone in southern Lebanon may still serve a purpose. It keeps certain weapons out of range. It forces Hezbollah to operate at a distance. But the fiber optic drone does not respect lines drawn on a map. It spools out its cable and flies where it is pointed, low, quiet, and for now, largely unstoppable. The arms race has a new front, and it costs a few $100s to enter.